Hi guys, this is Han from Better Music, and today we're looking at the Moog Subsequent 37. This is basically the follow-up to the Moog Sub 37, and if you're already familiar with that, you'll know that this is an absolutely solid unit. Wonderful for bass, it's got a tremendous low end to it. Just like the Sub 37, this synth is very immediate. It's got a knob per function to it, and then there's a little bit of menu diving just to get to some of the extra modulation, but otherwise it's basically right here in front of you. And it's got a very big sweet spot, like a lot of Moog products. First of all, we'll just look at the construction of the Subsequent 37. It's an absolutely solid unit, nice big knobs here, no sort of play in them, or unwanted play I mean. Really good, meant for a good beating. And then we've got 37 keys here, as the name would indicate. I'm not exactly a key player myself, but I can definitely tell that these are of solid construction. So anyone with a bit of a keyboard wizardry under their fingertips will definitely appreciate that. And then we've got the pitch wheel and modulation wheel, which once again just feel really nice and smooth. You know, don't feel like they're going anywhere they shouldn't. Nice and heavy, as Chris would put it. I suppose one of the things that I really like about this synthesizer, as I pointed out earlier, was its immediacy. So you've basically got every knob or button necessary to just create a universe of sounds with it. And it's all laid out quite logically. From left to right, you'll see that it actually drops into various columns, and it's not as bad as you think when you first take a look at it. I suppose what we'll do is we'll go from left to right briefly and just sort of list some of the components that make up this synthesizer. On the left-hand side here, we've got the programming column with our little black and white screen here at the top. This is just where we can access some of our presets and dive into a little more of the modulation that's not necessarily accessible via the front panel here. Once again, just tying into the whole idea of immediacy, we've got these init buttons, so we can just start fresh patches from the get-go without actually having to reset all the knobs there. And then we've got a little fine-tune knob down here as well, just so if you're playing with other instruments, you can sort of tune up to them or down to them, what have you. Next we've got the arpeggiator. This is a very strong point of this synth, very playable. It's not a program and then play, it's a program and play. You can basically manipulate the arpeggiator, or the sequencer for that matter, at the same time while you're playing it. So we've just obviously got the rate knob up here. It's got a tap tempo function and range mode, so we can transpose or add octaves to our arpeggiation or our sequencer, and back and forth and inversion of, once again, the arpeggio or the sequencer. And then patterns down here, up, down, in order, randomized, and then for the sequencer, we'll get into that a bit later. And most importantly, next we've got our two modulation buses. So we've got mod 1 and mod 2. It's an interesting way to look at it, but once you get your head around it, it's actually quite a intelligent design. We've got the LFOs at the top here, or a programmable source, as our modulation sources. So we've got triangle, sawtooth, falling ramp, rising ramp, random, and then the programmable source. These LFOs can be run into audio territory. They can also be synced to the master clock. And we've also got a keyboard reset button. So every time you strike a key, you'll reset that waveform, keeping everything in sync as well. We've got two fixed assignments for the modulation destination, so pitch and filter, where once again with the pitch, we can have that for just oscillator 1 or 2, or both. At the bottom here, we've got our destinations for modulation. We've got 6 or 5, I suppose, fixed destinations, but we've also got a programmable destination, which we can do on the fly just by holding down that destination button and tweaking almost any other knob here to create that as a modulation destination. And also, just to tack on to the end of the modulation, we've also got these little controller buttons here, so we can bring those modulation sources in and out, once again via a set of programmable sources, so whether that be the modulation wheel or a few others. Next we've got the oscillators. So we've got two oscillators and we've also got a sub below oscillator 1, and we've also got a noise source. The waveforms available for these oscillators are your classic analog waveforms, so triangle, sawtooth, square, and pulse width. Now this is actually a variable oscillator, so it'll actually sweep through those waveforms. So if we apply modulation to, say, a square wave, we'll get your classic pulse width modulation. But we can kind of get similar but different effects with some of the other waveforms as well, or modulate between, say, a sawtooth and square wave. Next to the waveform knob, we've got the octave switch ranging between your organ sizes. Once again, just really nice and immediate, just switching between octaves, immediately being able to change the timbre of a particular patch on the fly. We've got a hard sync function for the oscillators, so syncing oscillator 2 to oscillator 1, and a keyboard reset button as well. So with analog waveforms, they will just keep going regardless of whether you've gated them on or off or not. With the keyboard reset function, we can actually get those waveforms to start at 0 every time the key is struck, to avoid some of the kind of clicking that may be desirable or may be undesirable in particular patches. Now, another interesting point of the Subsequent 37 is its duophonic mode right here, and we can basically play each of those oscillators independently with each hand. And right next to that, we've got the choice as to whether the lower hand plays oscillator 1 or 2, and the same goes for the second hand. And then at the bottom, we've got a frequency and beat frequency for oscillator 2. And that beat frequency knob allows us to get a linear detuning of oscillator 2 to oscillator 1, regardless of where we're playing across the board. Then we've got our mixer section, nothing fancy, but once again, just really simple, good ideas. We've got either a pot for each of those sources to bring it in gradually, or we've got on-off buttons. And then at the bottom here, we've got a feedback or external input, somewhat self-explanatory, but basically we can process external audio sources, or if nothing is plugged into that external source, it'll actually route the output of the Subsequent 37 back into itself, so you can get some really fat and aggressive tones out of it. Next, most importantly, we've got the filter section with the classic Moog ladder filter with resonance and multi-drive and 4 different poles. So we've got 6 decibels per octave, 12, 18 and 24. Now it's the filter and the multi-drive that they've tweaked a little bit to give us a bit more headroom with the Subsequent 37 in comparison to the Sub 37. At the bottom here, we've got a fixed modulation source to the envelope and keyboard tracking all the way from nothing, 1 to 1, and then 2 to 1. Next, we've got the envelope generators, not to be underestimated. These are 6-stage envelopes, starting off with delay, attack, hold, decay, sustain, and release. And we've got various ways to trigger these envelopes, whether it be syncing it to the tempo, looping it, so effectively we can turn these envelope generators into complex LFOs, and a latch mode, so we can just have them open the whole time. And then at the end, we've got our output. Once again, just nice little touches like having a pot or just having a button to straight mute it if things are getting a little bit out of hand. And we've also got an independent output for the headphone, which runs independently from the master. Then if we just take a look at the side here, we've got our audio output and our audio input to process those external sources. And we've got pitch CV in, volume CV, filter CV, and keyboard gate. And then we've also got MIDI in and out and USB. Now, another really big strength of the Subsequent 37 is its sequencer. It's a 64-step sequence. We can add ratchets, mutes, ties. We can use the sequencer as a modulation source. We can shorten or lengthen the sequencer while it's playing, and all of those options that we've got in the arpeggiator section still apply to the sequencer as well. So we can transpose that into different octaves, going back and forth, or inverting the sequence as it moves through those various octaves. So it's a wicked sequencer. This has been the Moog Subsequent 37. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them below. See you next time.